On this week's episode of Ride the Lightning, the Tesla unofficial podcast, Tesla held its quarterly earnings call and we got some major announcements, such as a new low-cost vehicle that's coming sooner than you think, a big price reduction for the purchase price of FSD, the long-awaited launch of the new Model 3 Performance, and much more. What's happening, friends? I'm Ryan McCaffrey, joined by a curled up, but not yet sleeping, she will be by the end of the show, Daisy the Boxer. Welcome to episode 456 of Ride the Lightning, the Tesla unofficial podcast, coming to you every single Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. This episode is for April 28th, 2024. Well, there's so much to get to, I'm just going to jump right in. First, remember the Quicksilver paint news that I reported exclusively to you first here last week? Well, this week, it became official. Quicksilver is now available on, at least for now, inventory Model Ys, and it costs an extra $2,000, which is the same price as Ultra Red. So since it's Model Y only, at least for the time being, I'd have to reasonably speculate that these cars are coming out of Giga Texas because they don't build 3s, S's, or X's there. And Texas, in theory, has a more advanced paint shop than Fremont, if not, so we've been told, as advanced as Berlin. I suppose it's also possible that these are Berlin-built Model Y that are built to US specs and shipped over, but that seems not only inefficient by Tesla's standards, but also then those cars probably wouldn't get the federal tax credit. So I think we can scratch that. They're almost certainly built in Texas, but the 6th paint color is now official. Quicksilver available on the Model Y. Now, as to whether or not this will be officially added to the design studio so that at least on the Model Y you could do a custom order in Quicksilver, well, I didn't get any information from my Tesla source on that. But again, I would reasonably speculate that it will happen soon enough. And as I said last week, I cannot wait to see this color in person. There are only 2 Tesla paint colors that I have not had the privilege of seeing in person: Quicksilver and Midnight Cherry Red. So I'll be able to scratch one of those off of my list soon enough. My Tesla paint bucket list, I guess we could call it. Next, before we can even get to the earnings call, there is another big piece of news to go over. So again, 2 episodes ago, remember when the price of the monthly FSD subscription got cut in half to $99 per month, Well, I got almost exactly what I asked for on that episode. The buy it outright price of FSD is now $8,000, and enhanced autopilot is indeed gone. And just as a note to those of you this affects, if you already have enhanced autopilot, the price to upgrade from there to FSD is now $2,000. So I suspect that might tempt a number of you. I know if I were in that boat, I would do it. That would probably push me over the edge to go into FSD, but certainly you've got something to think about now, because it's $2,000 is not an insignificant amount of money, but it's also not crazy money. Like it's not like you're upgrading, you're paying another $6,000. It's quite a difference. So, of course, you'll remember from 2 episodes back, I had advocated for the FSD price to be cut to $6,000 and the removal of EAP, and well, we got pretty close. It is now back to what I paid for it just about 6 years ago, although the pricing structure was different then, but that's neither here nor there for this thought exercise. And the price of FSD is now about half of what it was at its peak. I had to look this up 18 months ago. About 18 months ago when it was $15,000. It had been back down to $12,000 for the past 7 months, as we all know. Also, I have to say, this has got to be a little bit of a kick in the gut to Cybertruck Foundation Series buyers. And I say that because Tesla isn't lowering the price of the Foundation Series Cybertrucks by $4,000. So while, yes, Foundation Series buyers were already paying in part for the pleasure of being one of the first people on the road to have what is, I think, unquestionably the most talked about and most attention-getting new vehicle of any kind in years, those Cybertruck Foundation Series buyers are now paying a bit more for that privilege because the $20,000 premium includes FSD and a handful of other things. But really, if you break it down, and plenty of folks online have, it was $12,000 is what you were having to price FSD at in that bundle, rather than, say, the $7,000 pre-order FSD price for early reservation holders. So it's a bit of a shame for Cybertruck Foundation Series buyers. Most notably, well, I guess it doesn't even matter if you've already bought your Cybertruck Foundation Series or not, but probably a little bit of an extra hard kick to the gut if you've already bought your Foundation Series Cybertruck, because, you know, you went in thinking you were paying for effectively $12,000 FSD, and now you're like, well, I just lost $4,000 basically. So that's a bit tough. At least for upcoming future Foundation Series Cybertruck buyers, it still stings probably, because you're like, well, that $20,000 premium's maybe not quite as great of a value package as it was before, but at least you will be able to make that purchasing decision with your eyes wide open, knowing that FSD is now down to $8,000. Some other thoughts on this. I feel like, and I say this very respectfully, but maybe Tesla's humbled a little bit here, in the sense that for a long time, they've been able to charge effectively whatever they wanted to for the cars and for everything else, including FSD, because demand was through the roof. Now that the demand has finally softened a bit, and by the way, that's for everyone, not just them, maybe thanks in part to the high interest rate environment that we're still in, but anyway, Tesla is now finally having to cut prices and give us some more options, such as the Quicksilver paint. But anyway, the question still remains, as I sort of referenced a minute ago with Cybertruck Foundation Series buyers, will Tesla honor those early Cybertruck reservation holders' $7,000 FSD pre-order price? I suppose you could make a case for why they're more likely to honor it now, or even make a case for why they're less likely to honor it now that they've slashed it to $8,000 for everyone. I still think that they should honor it, and I do still think that they will. Because giving that extra $1,000 off rewards those day one reservation holders who, by the time general production rolls around, will have been waiting for a full half decade before finally getting the opportunity to order a Cybertruck at MSRP, which, not to beat the dead horse here, is already a significantly higher FSD, a significantly higher MSRP than they thought they'd be paying when they placed those day one reservations half a decade ago. Plus, look at it this way. Would Tesla rather have that early reservation holder who's already having to spend more money than they thought they were going to need to back in 2019? Would they want to have that person spend $7,000 for FSD and honor that pre-order price, or risk that person spending $0 on FSD, which many of them might choose to do since, again, they're already paying more than they expected to for the truck? Therefore, I am holding firm in my prediction that Tesla will do the right thing and they will honor the $7,000 FSD pre-order price for those very early reservation holders. Next question on this topic. Is the price of FSD going to go back up? Remember Elon's frequently repeated comment about it being worth way more because the car was going to make you money in the Tesla network? Well, I personally think we're still years away from that specific scenario, although I acknowledge the huge progress they've made, and we're going to hear a lot more about this in the earnings call coming up. And so maybe the price might go back up in time. But here's the thing. Until you can actually sleep or completely not pay attention to what the car is doing at all, aka level 4 autonomy, we're at level 2 now, I just don't see a ton of people spending a 5-figure amount of money for FSD when the average sales price of a Tesla is, roughly $48,000 or so, since, let's just call it as a guesstimate here, since most of the cars that are sold are 3s and Ys that are, 40s to 50s. So let's just say if we take 48,000 as an average there, if you're going to pay 10, 12, you're talking about an extra 25% of the purchase price added on as an option for the software on top of the car. Because you've got to figure that most of the people buying Teslas, not you, not me, we're people who follow this stuff very closely, we're enthusiasts, but I'm talking about just the average Tesla buyer that just wants a good, reliable car that's safe, that has a low cost of ownership. The average Tesla buyer is that person. Well, they're already making a huge leap by moving from an internal combustion engine car to an electric car. And that's kind of scary. And I don't say that in any sort of mean or negative way about those folks. It's a big change. I just can't imagine those people en masse are even going to think about spending a 5-figure amount of money on a work-in-progress version of level 2 driver assistance software, no matter how good the incremental improvements are. I think it's going to have to be that huge change, which probably isn't going to happen overnight, but when it gets to sleep in the car, work in the car, don't have to pay attention, then okay, maybe you're going to get people that are more likely to pony up more money. But for now, I think the market has pretty clearly spoken to exactly the point I'm making. That's why it's being cut back down to $8,000. Again, roughly half of what it was at its peak just 18 months ago. So, final point on this. Will this move the needle? Well, of course it will. The question is how far, and if it's far enough for Tesla to be satisfied. Going back to last week's Patreon poll about what you would be willing to pay for FSD outright, 57% of you said $6,000 or less. And that 57% comes from me adding up the people that voted for $5,000 and the people that voted for $6,000. And as I think I said last week, all of you that voted in that poll are, again, enthusiasts who are probably more likely to consider buying FSD at all at any price. So I would make a respectful argument that the Patreon poll from last week is a statistically significant sample size. And if there's any merit to that hypothesis, then maybe going down to $8,000 isn't enough. Time will tell on that. But I don't think it's going to go up again by any amount anytime soon, like at least in the next year or so. And I think many of you would probably agree with me that Tesla could do wonders for the take rate if they would just make FSD transfer a permanent thing. Perhaps we will hear about that on the earnings call in a little while. Foreshadow, foreshadow. Anyway, I will say that personally speaking, if you're curious what I'm going to do, because as those of you that have been listening for a bit know, I am planning my next Tesla purchase for within the next year or so of a Cybertruck to replace my wife's 20-year-old Mini Cooper. So personally speaking, this does change the equation for me. I have said before, there are plenty of receipts on this podcast from over the years that I feel that I've gotten good value out of the $8,000 that I spent for FSD on my car. I use it every day, from back when it was just enhanced autopilot to now FSD. And the break-in period now versus the $99 monthly price is 6 years and 8 months, 6 2/3 years of ownership, 80 months, assuming that monthly price of FSD stays at $99. So you have to own your vehicle for 80 months, and then on the 81st month, you'd be getting a better deal if you purchased FSD outright. And for us, for me, my wife, for us, we do plan to keep our Cybertruck for far longer than 6 years and 8 months. So I think I am now okay with spending $8,000 on it, although I will say I'm not sure sitting here right now if I'll order it with the truck and have that rolled into the car loan, or if I'll just save my money and add it on later as a credit card purchase where I could get some fat credit card reward points back on that purchase. I'd have to be able to make sure that I could pay it off right away, because I wouldn't want to pay interest on having that $8,000 hit on my credit card. But anyway, I'm not sure yet, but I'm very strongly considering it. And even I'd probably go so far as to say, I think I'm willing to pay $8,000 as I sit here today. Who knows if things might change between now and then. But for now, I think I'm in at $8K, whereas I was absolutely not going to spend $12,000 on it. I might have done the monthly subscription, maybe, because that would have been a much, much longer break-even period on that. But my plan was to just stick with basic autopilot for a while and just in the use of driving the truck and using the truck after I got it, see how that felt. Because, again, I'm very privileged I'm used to having the full kit and caboodle FSD in my Model 3 every day. So I was going to just go with basic autopilot for a while, and if I felt like subscribing for the $99, I would have definitely considered that. But now, yeah, $8,000 for the outright purchase price, I think I'm in. All right. Speaking of predictions that I almost got right, as expected, the new Model 3 Performance, we hardly knew ye, Model 3 Ludicrous. It is called the Model 3 Performance, not Ludicrous. The car was announced. It was officially launched this past week. So in last week's Lightning Round mini episode on Patreon, I predicted a $53,000 price and a 0 to 60 time of 2.8 seconds. The actual price of the car is $53,000. The 0 to 60 time is 2.9 seconds, so just off, so close on that one. There's good news and there's bad news with that price, but don't worry, it's mostly good. First, let me mention that the horsepower, about the same. It's a slight bump to 510 horsepower. Interestingly, not the 600 horsepower that one, I can't remember which country it was. There was one country's regulatory listing on the motors that I talked about within the last month or two on the podcast that had listed it for 600 horsepower. So it's 510, and its weight is virtually unchanged over the outgoing, the now officially old Model 3 Performance in my garage at just over 4,000 pounds. The good news about the price that I teased a moment ago is that the new Model 3 Performance is eligible for the full point-of-sale $7,500 federal tax credit, provided, of course, that you meet the income requirements. The only bad news stems from the fact that you will have to choose between a paint color and white interior. You're not going to be able to have both and still stay under the $55,000 MSRP limit for that $7,500 tax credit, unless you really like stealth gray. The default color that you don't have to pay any more money for. If you want stealth gray with white interior, you can do that because the white interior is $1,500. You still come in $500 under the MSRP cap. But if you want any other color, any other paint color with white interior, you've got to choose between them or sacrifice the tax credit entirely. It's just a little annoying. I know this is the most first world complaint of all time. I recognize that as before the words come out of my mouth here. But it's just Tesla. Guys, it's just a little annoying that the white interior is $1,500 because if it was $1,000 for white interior, you could get that and at least have a couple more paint color choices because you could do white interior and then pearl white or deep blue metallic. You still wouldn't be able to do solid black, which is bizarrely $1,500 for solid black. And ultra red, of course, $2,000. That's off the table if you want white interior and the tax credit. So if I were going with one of these to replace my wife's aforementioned 20-year-old Mini Cooper instead of the Cybertruck, I will tell you that I would be sweating through the, again, ultimate first world problem right now. I would be driving myself nuts trying to make a decision here because all of you know me pretty well. You know that my ideal configuration is ultra red with white interior. My Model 3 in the garage now is multi-coat red with white interior, and I adore it. I absolutely love the ultra red, and I love the white interior just as much. The white interior for me just really, I know it sounds maybe silly to say, it's just when you're in the car, well actually if you're in the car or outside the car looking at it, it really brightens up the interior for me. And it just feels a little more, I don't know, futuristic to me, I guess. I know that's totally subjective, but I adore my white interior. I would not want to give it up, but the fact is, again, if I were going with this car, which I would be if the Cybertruck didn't exist, there's simply no way my wife would sign off on giving up the tax credit just so that I could get white seats. Because if I did that, it would turn those white seats effectively into $9,000 seats. So if I were in that position, if I were going with a new performance Model 3, I think I'd have to give in on the interior and go with black interior because for me, not only is the ultra red just too nice, but on top of that, for me, again, recognizing paint color is like the most subjective thing about someone's taste in cars, none of the other four paint colors, for me, just come even remotely close to being as nice as ultra red. It's no contest here in the McCaffrey household. But anyway, my point is, I am stoked that this new Model 3 Performance is tax credit eligible. But boy, Tesla is going to make you make a tough decision if you like white interior. If you were going to go with black interior anyway, you are golden. Pick whatever paint color you want, and you are going to be a very happy customer because you're getting an insane value on the new Model 3 Performance. Absolutely bonkers value. A 500 horsepower car that does 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds, that has 296 miles of range. By the way, that I should have given that number sooner. That's the official mileage rating, EPA mileage rating. And you can get that for about $45,000 with a tax credit. Again, that's point of sale. You don't have to, that's out the door. Granted, there's destination fee, taxes, all that stuff. But if you just go with a black interior, stealth gray Model 3 Performance, you're at about $45,000 roughly. So that's crazy. And even if you do add a paint color with your black seats, you're still well under $50,000 for so much car. Just, again, I know I've said this before, but just for a little context on this, and this, I'm not even going to factor in the inflation piece of it. In 2018, I paid, let's see, if I take FSD and enhanced autopilot, if I just strip out the software, I paid $72,000 for my Model 3 Performance. Although I did get the tax credit later, and there was a $2,500 California, but that's a state by state. Let's just, if we do apples to apples, let's just say it's 53 compared to, let's not factor in the tax credit, although you should. Anyway, whatever. 53 versus 72. So, I mean, you're getting, and again, if you did factor in inflation, that gap would be even more significant. So you're getting a heck of a deal right now compared to when the Model 3 Performance first came out. It's just crazy. I love it. I love this car. Again, I'm looking forward to driving it. It is at least a couple showrooms right now. My goal this weekend, after I record the podcast here, is to at least go see it and sit in it. And as soon as Tesla starts allowing test drives, I will take one. And then I'll do a whole wrap on this podcast comparing my car to the new one. So this week's Patreon poll, which, a reminder, you can vote on totally for free. You don't have to be supporting me on Patreon to vote in the poll. Just stop by every Tuesday evening or, anytime thereafter during the week to vote. And you can do that at my Patreon page, which is found at patreon.com/Tesla podcast. And that poll question this week was simply, after the car was launched on Tuesday, what do you think of the new Model 3 Performance? 55% of you saying, I love it, killer value and looks. Another 22% of you said, I like it, but wish it had gone a bit further in either looks, specs, or price. 8% of you saying, I'm not into it. And 5% of you saying, it's okay, but I was hoping for more in more than one of those three categories: looks, specs, and price. So a good number of you are with me on this, loving this car, at least on paper and to your eyes. None of us have had a chance to drive it yet. But thanks to everybody that took the time to vote in this week's Patreon poll. Another way to think about the tax credit eligibility here on this car, what with the FSD price drop to $8,000 and all, is that with the other Model 3s not qualifying for the tax credit, you could get FSD on your Model 3 Performance and practically get it for, air quotes, free relative to the other Model 3s. If you wanted to look at spending your tax credit that way, that's not eligible on the other Model 3s, you could look at it as basically getting FSD for $500. Anyway, I've watched, there are a few videos, because you remember I talked about how Tesla had an event for this that I wish I'd been lucky enough to get invited to. So there was an event with some content creators, and their embargo did indeed lift on Tuesday, the day that the car was launched. And I've watched all the videos I could find. So I've watched Marquez Brownlee, MKBHD. I've watched Top Gear's video. And Jason Camisa from Haggerty did a podcast this time around rather than a whole super fancily edited, wonderfully shot video. But the podcast conversation that he had, it was an hour or 50-something minutes about this car. And I was riveted. I listened to every minute of it. And perhaps not coincidentally, it's those same three people that Tesla invited to get the first drives of the Cybertruck, you may recall as well. All three of those folks had really great things to say about the new Model 3 Performance overall, but with full respect to all of them, the perspective I wanted to share with you and that I'm interested in as a Model 3 Performance owner is my perspective. What I want to know what this car is like in direct comparison to an old Model 3 Performance. Now, Marquez owned a Model S Plaid for a couple of years that he sold fairly recently. So, the Plaid is obviously just way more car than the Model 3 Performance in every sense of the word. So I am really, really interested in the opinion of somebody who's been daily driving a Model 3 Performance for a while. Because for me, it'll be an apples to apples comparison to really quantify how much of an improvement the new version is compared to the old version in my garage. So as soon as I'm able to get a test drive, which I hope will be fairly soon, I will give you my review of the car from exactly that perspective. I hope all of you who are kindly supporting me on Patreon for my weekly podcast efforts here. It's a free podcast. It always has been. It always will be. But a number of you are very kind and generous to voluntarily go to patreon.com/Tesla podcast and pledge your support so that I can keep doing this thing week in and week out. And if you are backing me, if you are supporting me at the $10 tier or higher, you get access to a weekly bonus mini episode that I call the Lightning Round every single week. There are over 90 of them now. And this week's, as of this recording, I actually haven't recorded this week's yet. I wanted to get the full podcast done first because all the news happened. The earnings call was the big thing, the FSD price drop. Wanted to get the full episode out to the Patreon backers a little early, and either after this tonight or tomorrow, I will get this week's lightning round done. So I don't know what this week's is about, but if you do like this podcast and you would like to support it, I would be humbled and grateful if you would consider a pledge. The pledge tiers start at just $5 a month. And for that $5 a month, you will get, as a thank you, early access to each week's episode. If you step up to that $10 per month tier or higher, you'll get the early access each week, and you'll get access to that entire library of those lightning round mini episodes that I do every single week. So head on over to patreon.com/Tesla podcast to go check all that out. A reminder as well, there's a free 7-day trial that Patreon has available, and that's on that $10 per month tier. So you can sign up without paying anything to see what it's like to get those perks and be a Patreon backer. Also, I should add that there's now a community chat the Patreon added that feature recently. And thanks to a very kind Patreon backer who reminded me, hey, could you turn that on? I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that Patreon added that recently. So as I click in here right now, there's actually a fun open Tesla discussion chat with a lot of folks just posting thoughts, Tesla chatter in here. So you'd be welcome to join that as well. So again, check out my Patreon page if you feel so inclined at patreon.com/Tesla podcast. Before I get to the shareholder letter and the earnings call, there is plenty to cover. I want to remind you that this week's Ride the Lightning is brought to you in part by Accelerate Auto and their X-Care extended warranty policy for your Tesla. Policies can be customized for anything from, you could just match the Tesla extended warranty, which is 2 years, 25,000 miles, or you could go 3 years and 40,000 miles, which is what I have. You could go 5 years and 50,000 miles, or 5 years and 100,000 miles, or just a battery and powertrain extended warranty, or all of it and the battery and powertrain warranty. It's all customizable. X-Care can be suited to whatever fits best for you and your car and what you're looking to keep covered and keep in control for cost-wise in case anything were to happen. So head on over to their website, check them out, see which plan is right for you. The website is accelerateauto.com/xcare. which is spelled XCELERATEAUTO.com/XCARE. And don't forget to use the discount code LIGHTNING for $100 off your purchase. Again, that $100 off code LIGHTNING at accelerateauto.com/xcare. All right, let's get to the earnings call, the shareholder letter. As always, I want to start with the shareholder letter. There's plenty to chew on in all of this, but rather than do my usual thing of running you through the highlights of the entire shareholder letter, really, I was looking through the whole thing. I want to jump straight to what was, in my humble opinion, by far the most interesting part of the shareholder letter, which will be elaborated on in the earnings call as well. But this is huge right here. So take a listen to this. Remember when I talked about the Reuters report about the quote-unquote Model 2? Again, it's not its name, but that's what we're just referring to it as a shorthand. The Reuters report about the Model 2 being canceled from a couple episodes back. And I said on that podcast that I thought there just had to be a missing piece of the puzzle that Tesla and or Reuters wasn't telling us. Well, I think we just got that missing piece in this quarterly shareholder letter, or at least enough of a piece to see what's really going on here. So in short, Reuters wasn't wrong, nor were they lying, as Elon said. The Model 2 on the Gen 3 platform that had been in development does appear to have been canceled. However, it would appear that Tesla instead is building a simpler Model 2, one that uses proven and established technologies both in the car and in the manufacturing process in order to get it to market as soon as humanly possible. So I'm going to read you the relevant line of the shareholder letter, and it comes at the very end of it in the Outlook section. It's the very last bit of text in the entire thing. Quote, "We have updated our future vehicle lineup to accelerate the launch of new models ahead of our previously communicated start of production in the second half of 2025. These new vehicles, including more affordable models, will utilize aspects of the next generation platform as well as aspects of our current platforms and will be able to be produced on the same manufacturing lines as our current vehicle lineup. This update may result in achieving less cost reduction than previously expected, but enables us to prudently grow our vehicle volumes in a more CapEx efficient manner during uncertain times. This would help us fully utilize our current expected maximum capacity of close to 3 million vehicles, enabling more than 50% growth over 2023 production before investing in new manufacturing lines. Our purpose-built robotaxi product will continue to pursue a revolutionary unboxed manufacturing strategy." End quote. So, there it is. That's the bombshell from this earnings call and shareholder letter. Now, presumably, as I think I might have talked about on the podcast previously, the Generation 3 car, aka the $25,000 car, aka the Model 2, was going to use the unboxed manufacturing technique. That was this entire new manufacturing process that they were going to set up first at Giga Texas, then Giga Mexico, then other factories. And my own speculation here, that Gen 3 car was probably going to use 48-volt architecture and steer-by-wire and ether loop super fast vehicle communication system, and who knows what else, what other next-gen technologies, stuff that the Cybertruck is doing that they might have had planned for it. While I would guess that the $25,000 car is still going to use 48-volt just for the wiring savings alone, the materials alone, not to mention the fact that Tesla's trying to drag the entire car industry into 48 volts, so it stands to reason that they're next ultra high volume car would use 48 volt. The rest of that stuff, the rest of a lot of the cool tech in the Cybertruck might not make it into at least the first iteration of what I am going to affectionately call the Model 2.5 as a shorthand to differentiate it from the original Model 2, the Gen 3 platform version of it. And I use that term to signify that it's probably going to be a bit closer to the Model 3 in terms of what's under the skin of this car, the technologies in the car, the manufacturing process of the car. So let's see if in the Tesla community we can make Model 2.5, if we can make that shorthand catch on. I will say, remember back in the day in 2018 when I was getting my performance Model 3, P3D, that was my term, and that caught on. That was a thing for a while. So I'm putting it out there for your consideration. Model 2.5. Anyway, this brings up a good question. Is the Model 2.5 going to be built on the Model 3 platform? Or maybe a smaller version of it that will still almost certainly, like I would be willing to bet an In-N-Out Burger lunch on it, use LFP batteries exclusively. Like every single Model 2.5 has LFPs in it. I mean, it's no doubt going to look unique. It's not going to look like a Model 3. Or a Model Y, because I would actually wager that it's probably going to be a compact SUV and not a sedan, because as the Model Y has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, the market wants SUVs. In fact, the comparison to the Model Y here brings me to my big takeaway from this bombshell announcement. Even though this car sounds less exciting to me, quite frankly, it sounds kind of boring. The thing is, I don't say that as a bad thing. Boring is probably the better way to go right now. Tesla sees the entire car market, including EVs, unfortunately, cooling off right now. And so they're fast-tracking this thing. They are going to go into hyperspeed to get this thing out as quickly as they can. And I'm going to make a prediction right now that you can hold me to. I believe the first deliveries of this car will occur in June of 2025. Unless Elon thinks it can be done sooner than that. Stay tuned. Foreshadow again. We'll talk about that in a little while on the earnings call. But anyway, back to my point about boring being good. Remember how Elon said that he learned a big lesson after the Model X and how complex that vehicle was to design and very much to build? And when it came time to build the company's next SUV, the Model Y turned out to literally be a slightly taller Model 3 with a hatchback. It was a boring car in terms of the design. I remember thinking that when I saw it at the unveiling that I was lucky enough to be at back in 2019, March of 2019. In fact, exactly, just over 5 years ago now. I was in the room and I was like, oh man, there's nothing exciting about this. This is just a taller Model 3 with a hatchback. But history proved Tesla right. The Model Y was exactly what the market needed and what the market wanted. And as we all know, it is the reigning best-selling car on Earth, which is a title that it will probably hold again this year. So, while I personally love that Tesla always likes to challenge themselves and push the engineering forward, like we are seeing right now with the Cybertruck and all the incredible engineering in that truck, I really think that for this car, the Model 2.5, this is a vehicle and this is a situation where simpler is better. It's better for them and it's better for the market. They can get it out quicker. It'll be a simpler car to build, maybe a simpler car to scale up, maybe a simpler car to service. It's just simpler. Boring is good in this case. Now, this car might not be a vehicle for me because I'm a car enthusiast. I'm a Tesla enthusiast. I drive a performance Model 3. I'm waiting for a Cybertruck. But that's okay. It's not intended for me. This car is intended to kill the internal combustion engine car, which is the tipping point in the EV movement. If it's able to do for the affordable car market what the Model Y has done a little bit more upmarket in the crossover SUV space, that's exactly what's going to happen. If this thing comes in under $30,000 and it is safe and it has good range and it's low cost of ownership, low fuel cost because of course it's an EV, and it has autonomous features built into it and more if you want to pay more for it, and it's 25 to 30 grand, it's going to end any financial argument that the internal combustion engine vehicle can make. That's going to be a massive moment for the EV movement as a whole. So, as I've said before, I do hope that Tesla waits as long as they possibly can to unveil it. If I'm right, and this thing is out in just over a year, or even more so, if Elon's right, again, spoiler for the earnings call that's coming up in a couple minutes, and it's going to be out even quicker than that, then they don't need to take a bunch of pre-orders. They know it's going to sell like hotcakes for years to come. They don't need to get 2 million pre-orders. Like, the Cybertruck was so out there that it made sense to have the pre-orders, take the reservations, and figure out what exactly is the demand for something this far out there. But this car, being simple, being very affordable, being no frills, not a lot of bells and whistles, they don't need pre-orders. They don't need that. All they need, they know they're going to sell every single one they can for quite some time. So they also know that production is probably going to start a bit slow, although if they're using existing vehicle technologies, existing manufacturing technologies, same production lines, they might be able to get through the production ramp quite quickly, like Tesla did with the Model Y when it first rolled out of Fremont. Like, the Model 3 went through a production hell. The Cybertruck's going through a pretty slow ramp right now. But this thing, the 2.5, could mirror the Model Y, which the Y was out there in quantity pretty quickly because it had so much parts overlap with the Model 3. So I think Tesla should wait to unveil this thing until the absolute last second possible. And by that I mean the time right before when it would just need to be showing up on public roads for validation testing anyway. So maybe this fall, maybe early next year, maybe August 8th. Let's talk more about that in a minute too. All right. I'll just read you, before we get to the earnings call, I like to do this every single quarter. I just want to read you one more thing, the summary, just the Tesla summary of their quarter. I think this is relevant information just to take into your brain as a Tesla fan. They said, for Q1 2024, we experienced numerous challenges in Q1, from the Red Sea conflict and the arson attack at Gigafactory Berlin to the gradual ramp of the updated Model 3 in Fremont. Excluding Cybertruck and unscheduled downtime, our COGS per unit declined sequentially, driven primarily by lower raw material costs. Global EV sales continue to be under pressure as many car makers prioritize hybrids over EVs. While positive for our regulatory credits business, we prefer the industry to continue pushing EV adoption, which is in line with our mission. To support our growth, we have been increasing awareness and expanding vehicle financing programs, including attractive leasing terms for our customers. While many are pulling back on their investments, we are investing in future growth, including our AI infrastructure, production capacity, our supercharger and service networks, and new products infrastructure, with $2.8 billion of capital expenditures in Q1. we recently undertook a cost-cutting exercise to increase operational efficiency. We also remain committed to company-wide cost reduction, including reducing COGS per vehicle. Ultimately, we are focused on profitable growth, including by leveraging existing factories and production lines to introduce new and more affordable products. The future is not only electric, but also autonomous. We believe scaled autonomy is only possible with data from millions of vehicles and an immense AI training cluster. We have and continue to expand both. To make FSD supervised more accessible, we reduced the price of subscription to $99 per month and the purchase price to $8,000 in the US. All right, well, much more to come on autonomy in the earnings call. So let's get to it, starting as always with Elon Musk's opening statement. This is just under 6 minutes long. Enjoy, and then we'll talk about it.
So to recap, in Q1, we navigated several unforeseen challenges as well as the ramp for the updated Model 3 in Fremont. There was, as people have seen, the EV adoption rate globally is under pressure, and a lot of other auto manufacturers are pulling back on EVs and pursuing plug-in hybrids instead. We believe this is not the right strategy, and electric vehicles will ultimately dominate the market. Despite these challenges, the Tesla team did a great job executing in a tough environment, and energy storage deployments, the Megapack in particular, reached an all-time high in Q1, leading to record profitability for the energy business. And that looks likely to continue to increase in the quarters and years ahead. It will increase. We actually know that it will. Significantly faster than the car business, as we expected. We also continue to expand our AI training capacity in Q1, more than doubling our training compute sequentially. In terms of the new product roadmap, there's been a lot of talk about our upcoming vehicle line in the past several weeks. We've updated our future vehicle lineup to accelerate the launch of new models ahead of previously mentioned start of production in the second half of 2025. So we expect it to be more like the early 2025, if not late this year. These new vehicles, including more affordable models, will use aspects of the next generation platform, as well as aspects of our current platforms, and will be able to be produced on the same manufacturing lines as our current vehicle lineup. So it's not contingent on any new factory or massive new production line. It'll be made on our current production lines much more efficiently. And we think this should allow us to get to over 3 million vehicles of capacity when realized to the full extent. Regarding FSD version 12, which is the pure AI-based self-driving, people that if you haven't experienced this, I strongly urge you to try it out. It's profound, and the rate of improvement is rapid. So we've now turned that on for all cars with the cameras and inference computer and everything from Hardware 3 on in North America. So it's been pushed out to, I think, around 1.8 million vehicles, and we're seeing about half of people use it so far, and that percentage is increasing with each passing week. So we now have over 300 billion miles that have been driven with FSD V12. Since the launch of full self-driving, supervised full self-driving, it's become very clear that the vision-based approach with end-to-end neural networks is the right solution for scalable autonomy. And it's really how humans drive. Our entire road network is designed for biological neural nets and eyes. So naturally, cameras and digital neural nets are the solution to our current road system. To make it more accessible, we've reduced the subscription price to $99 a month, so it's easy to try out. And as we've announced, we'll be showcasing our purpose-built robotaxi or Cybercab in August. Regarding AI compute, over the past few months, we've been actively working on expanding Tesla's core AI infrastructure. For a while there, we were training constrained in our progress. We are, at this point, no longer training constrained, and so we're making rapid progress. We've installed and commissioned, meaning they're actually working, 35,000 H100 computers or GPUs. GPU is the wrong word. They need a new word. I always feel like a wince when I say GPU because it's not GPU stands for G stands for graphics and doesn't do graphics. But anyway, roughly 35,000 H100s are active, and we expect that to be probably 85,000 or thereabouts by the end of this year. In training, just for training. We are making sure that we're being as efficient as possible in our training. It's not just about the number of H100s, but how efficiently they're used. So, in conclusion, we're super excited about our autonomy roadmap. I think it should be obvious to anyone who's driving version 12 in a Tesla that is only a matter of time before we exceed the reliability of humans, and not much time at that. And we're really headed for an electric vehicle, an autonomous future. And I'll go back to something I said several years ago, that in the future, gasoline cars that are not autonomous will be like riding a horse and using a flip phone. And that will become very obvious in hindsight. We continue to make the necessary investments that will drive growth and profits for Tesla in the future. And I wanted to thank the Tesla team for incredible execution during this period and look forward to everything that we have planned ahead.
Well, let's skip right to the good stuff here, which is his comment on the Model 2.5. If they really plan to launch a low-cost car at the end of this year, or even early next, it likely means, or at least I'd have to think, that it's going to be revealed at the Cybercab event on August 8th. Certainly Tesla could give it its own event, but if they're pressing fast forward on this, they might not even want to bother taking their foot off of the accelerator for even a second to do a separate entire event for that car. Plus, there is the risk of Osborning the 3 and or the Y, as I was referring to in my earlier comments from the shareholder letter, but they obviously have to reveal it sometime. So on the back of the Cybercab event seems like as good a time as any, and the timing feels right relative to what Elon is targeting for that start of production window. And speaking of the Cybercab, I guess Tesla is, and we shouldn't be surprised here, going full Blade Runner with the robotaxi, the car that you won't drive yourself, and quite possibly, I wonder, will you even get to own it yourself? That is a big question. What if I want to buy a Cybercab and use it to take me and my family around and maybe just have it send my daughter to school potentially while I stay home and work, and then it just comes back on its own? Something like that, and potentially also use it to earn me money? Selling the Cybercabs to customers could help Tesla accelerate the recouping of the money that they're going to spend on building them, right? So I wonder how that's going to shake out. Anyway, it makes a ton of sense for it to be made in unpainted HFS, hard freaking stainless, because that means the Cybercabs will be tough. They can take abuse from passengers being in and out of them all day, and their exterior finishes won't require maintenance like waxing or ceramic coating, nor would they show nearly the amount of wear and tear that a painted car would in that use case where there's going to be chips and scratches and all that kind of stuff. And since HFS, we know, is super difficult to shape, it will by definition be all hard angles, no curves. I have to say, though, I'm almost more curious about what the interior of the Cybercab will look like, since if it doesn't have pedals or a steering wheel, it could be anything. Is it going to be like a little living room in there? Is it going to be Tesla seats facing each other, like the front row turned around, like, you know, kind of a Westworld flying car situation, the interiors of those, if you've watched that show? Or is it going to be a smaller car that only seats one row, maybe 2 to 3 passengers? I don't know. Those are the questions that are on my mind here. My one other comment on this is about the vision approach being the right approach that you heard Elon talk about. I'd like to very politely just raise one question about that. What about inclement weather? I mean, the cameras in our skulls that Elon talks about, that we navigate with the 2 cameras in our head when we drive now, but those cameras in our heads don't work super well when there's a crazy snowstorm or a rainstorm, particularly at night. Now, I suppose no system will be perfect, but I am curious how the vision-only system is going to evolve with regard to, let's politely call them, non-California conditions. All right, that's enough of the opening statement. We've got 13 more clips to get through. Some of them are super short. In fact, most of them are, well, they're pretty much all shorter than the chunk you just heard from Elon. As always, the opening statement from Elon's always the longest one. So I promise this won't be like ridiculously long, but we got plenty of meat left on the bone here. So the next clip, the perennially upvoted retail shareholder question asking about the progress of the 4680 battery cell production ramp. You probably could have guessed this one before I even mentioned it. So anyway, here is Tesla's senior engineer, Lars Moravi.
Sure. 4680 production increased about 18-20% from Q4, reaching greater than 1K a week for Cybertruck, which is about 7 gigawatt hours per year, as we posted on X. We expect to stay ahead of the Cybertruck ramp with the cell production throughout Q2 as we ramp the 3rd of 4 lines in phase 1, while maintaining multiple weeks of cell inventory to make sure we're ahead of the ramp. Because we're ramping, COGS continues to drop rapidly week over week, driven by yield improvements throughout the lines and production volume increases. So our goal, and we expect to do this, is to beat supplier costs of nickel-based cells by the end of the year.
Is it just me, or are these updates starting to become a little boring each quarter? And again, I say that as a compliment. It's a good thing that the ramp on the 4680 cells is progressing so well that there's not really much to say or any crazy revelation, any like headline news coming out of it. This is what we want, right? We want 4680 to just scale up and not be a thing that we even have to ask about anymore. All right. Next up, how about an Optimus robot update? We go back to Elon for this one.
We are able to do simple factory tasks, or at least I should say factory tasks in the lab. In terms of actually, we do think we will have Optimus in limited production in the factory, in the actual factory itself, doing useful tasks before the end of this year. And then I think we may be able to sell it externally by the end of next year. These are just guesses. As I've said before, I think Optimus will be more valuable than everything else combined. Because if you've got a sentient humanoid robot that is able to navigate reality and do tasks at request, there is no meaningful limit to the size of the economy. So that's what's going to happen. And I think Tesla is best positioned of any humanoid robot maker to be able to reach volume production with efficient inference on the robot itself. This perhaps is a point that is worth emphasizing. Tesla's AI inference efficiency is vastly better than any other company. No, there's no company even close to the inference efficiency of Tesla. We've had to do that because we were constrained by the inference hardware in the car. We didn't have a choice. But that will pay dividends in many ways.
In my humble opinion, and it's not like this is any sort of grand take here, but Optimus is the biggest wild card in the Tesla product roadmap. Will Elon be proven right? with Optimus making more money for the company than everything else that Tesla makes combined? Or will it rank somewhere else on the revenue chart? Certainly, it's not going to start out immediately as this stratospheric financial wonder, but I'm really fascinated to follow this thing as it gets closer and closer to being a real-world product, which, as you heard, we are starting to get closer to that. The form factor and dexterity have certainly come a long way fairly quickly if you've seen the update videos that they've posted over here and there. But we still don't know much of anything about the software side of Optimus other than the fact that it's going to be powered by the FSD software. That's going to be the brain of this thing. So I'm intrigued. Even if it's the cars that I'm always most interested in, I am fascinated by Optimus and what it's going to be like. Okay, next up, any update on what the process of getting regulatory approval of FSD is going to be like? Well, here's a very long response. I promised you shorter clips. This is the only other clip that's pretty long. So this one's from Lars, followed by Elon.
I can start. There are a handful of states that already have adopted autonomous vehicle laws. These states are paving the way for operations, while the data for such operations guides a broader adoption of driverless vehicles. I think a show can talk a little bit about our safety methodology, but we expect that these states and the work ongoing, as well as the data that we're providing, will pave the way for a broad-based regulatory approval in the U.S. at least, and then other countries as well.
Yeah. It's actually been pretty helpful that other autonomous car companies have been cutting a path through the regulatory jungle. That's actually quite helpful. And they have obviously been operating in San Francisco for a while. I think they got approval for City of LA. So these approvals are happening rapidly. I think if you've got at scale a statistically significant amount of data that shows conclusively that the autonomous car has, let's say, half the accident rate of a human-driven car, I think that's difficult to ignore, because at that point, stopping autonomy means killing people. So I actually do not think that there will be significant regulatory barriers, provided there is conclusive data that the autonomous car is safer than a human-driven car. And in my view, this will be much like elevators. Elevators used to be operated by a guy with a relay switch, but sometimes that guy would get tired or drunk or just make a mistake and shear somebody in half between floors. So now we just get in an elevator and press a button. We don't think about it. In fact, it's kind of weird if somebody's standing there with a relay switch. That'll be how cars work. You just summon a car using your phone. You get in, it takes you to a destination, you get out.
You don't even think about it.
You don't even think about it. Just like an elevator. It takes you to your floor. That's it. Don't think about how the elevator is working or anything like that. Now, something I should clarify is that Tesla will be operating the fleet. So you can think of like how Tesla, think of Tesla like, I don't know, some combination of Airbnb and Uber, meaning that, there'll be some number of cars that Tesla owns itself and operates in the fleet. There'll be some number of cars, and then there'll be a bunch of cars where they're owned by the end user, but that end user can add or subtract their car to the fleet whenever they want. And they can decide if they want to only let the car be used by friends and family, or only by 5-star users, or by anyone. And at any time, they could have the car come back to them and be exclusively theirs, like an Airbnb. You could rent out your guest room or not anytime you want. As our fleet grows, we have 7 million cars, 9 million cars, eventually tens of millions of cars worldwide. With a constant feedback loop, every time something goes wrong, that gets added to the training data, and you get this training flywheel happening In the same way that Google search has the sort of flywheel, it's very difficult to compete with Google because people are constantly doing searches and clicking, and Google's getting that feedback loop. It's the same with Tesla, but at a scale that is maybe difficult to comprehend, but ultimately be tens of millions. I think there's also some potential here for an AWS element down the road, where if we've got very powerful inference, because we've got a hardware 3 in the cars, but now all cars are being made with hardware 4. Hardware 5 is pretty much designed and should be in cars hopefully towards the end of next year. And there's a potential to have to run when the car is not moving to actually run distributed inference. So kind of like AWS, but distributed inference. Like, it takes a lot of computers to train an AI model, but many orders of magnitude less compute to run it. So if you can imagine a future perhaps where there's a fleet of 100 million Teslas, and on average they've got like maybe a kilowatt of inference compute, that's 100 gigawatts of inference compute distributed all around the world. It's pretty hard to put together 100 gigawatts of AI compute. And even in an autonomous future where the car is perhaps used, instead of being used 10 hours a week, is used 50 hours a week, that still leaves over 100 hours a week where the car inference computer could be doing something else. And it seems like it would be a waste not to use it.
There was a lot discussed in there, and while the Airbnb plus Uber analogy for the robotaxi network is a new one and seemingly a good analogy, honestly, how it works isn't new, because this is how Elon has been describing it from the beginning. The difference now is that Tesla is actually starting to make real plans for it. In fact, outside of the earnings call, they released a mock-up of what the ride-sharing network UI might look like in your Tesla app. One more interesting thing, by the way, or more specifically, a lack thereof, to me, was that the previous name that Tesla had used for this entire thing, Tesla Network, was not mentioned once here. That's not to say that they won't end up calling it that, but it's fair to wonder if they're maybe thinking about other names since they didn't utter Tesla Network during this. And we also had an unprompted mention of Autopilot Hardware 5 there. It's not the first time that we've had a mention of it, but it is the first time that a timeline has been put on it. So, if Hardware 5 is already taped out and it's going to go into cars towards the end of next year, well, you'd certainly think that the Roadster's going to get it, since that car will hopefully please to the Tesla gods that are listening, to everybody out there that may have a power over this. Hopefully the new Roadster is going to be going into production around then, the end of next year or shortly thereafter. But I suspect it would probably go into the S and X pretty quickly as well, before making its way into the higher volume cars, Cybertruck, then 3 and Y, as the production and supply of the Hardware 5 hardware packages scales up. And if that timeline holds on Hardware 5, that means that Hardware 4, which, by the way, is only just now finally being used exclusively, meaning Hardware 3 only just got retired at the end of last year. Model 3s still had Hardware 3 up until the old model was discontinued right at the end of December there. Means that Hardware 4 will only have around 2.5, I mean, you could generously call it a 3-year run, which is shorter than the Hardware 3 run. Hardware 3 started rolling out in March of 2019, and lasted 4 years. If you're talking about the Model 3, it lasted almost 5. So just a little context for you there. I'm not complaining, to be clear. I am just pointing out that, look, hardware is accelerating faster, which I think for the most part is a good thing, right? Like we want to see more frequent updates, better tech, cooler hardware in our cars. Okay, next up, there was a question asked about the timeline of the low-cost car. Here's Lars, followed by Elon.
I think Elon mentioned it in the opening remarks, but as you mentioned, we're updating our future vehicle lineup to accelerate the launch of our low-cost vehicles in a more CapEx efficient way. That's our mission, to get the most affordable cars to customers as fast as possible. These new vehicles will be built on our existing lines and open capacity, and that's a major shift, to utilize all our capacity with marginal CapEx before we go spend high CapEx to do anything.
Yeah, we'll talk about this more on August 8th. But really the way to think of Tesla is almost entirely in terms of solving autonomy and being able to turn on that autonomy for a gigantic fleet. And I think it might be the biggest asset value appreciation in history when that day happens, when you can do unsupervised full self-driving.
5 million cars.
Yeah.
Well, a little less.
Well,
some of those have
it'll be 7 million cars, in a year or so. Yeah. And then 10 million, and then, eventually we're talking about tens of millions of cars. Not eventually, it's like before the end of this decade. Yeah, before the end of the decade, it's several tens of millions of cars, I think.
This made me think and realize that we have not had a brand new car unveiling, so I'm not counting the S and X refresh or the 3 fresh, a brand new car unveiling from Tesla since the Cybertruck in November of 2019. So it will have been just shy of 5 years between new vehicle reveals once August rolls around. Again, it's not a complaint, it's just a historical observation, and hopefully it won't be nearly as long. In fact, it shouldn't be, because our last update on said next-gen Roadster was that Tesla would unveil it at the end of this year. So we'll see if that's still going to be the case now that they've pulled forward their Model 2.5 plan. The next-gen Roadster's been pushed back so many times. What's one more time? But hopefully it will be far less than 5 years, hopefully less than 1 year between the Cybercab unveiling and the next-gen Roadster re-reveal. Anyway, I cannot wait to see what Tesla has in mind with this Cybercab, and, like I said, possibly the low-cost car, the Model 2.5 as well, if they decide to do a just one more thing surprise reveal of that car at the same event. Next up, here's Lars on the progress of the Cybertruck production ramp.
I can take that one too. Cybertruck hit 1K a week just a couple weeks ago. This happened in the first 4 to 5 months since we SOP'd late last year. Of course, volume production is what matters. That's what drives costs, and so our costs are dropping. But the ramp still faces a lot of challenges with so many new technologies, some supplier limitations, etc., and we'll continue to ramp this year, just focusing on cost efficiency and quality.
While asking about the progress of the Cybertruck production ramp is certainly a perfectly valid question, I would have also liked to have seen the question, when will general production start, get upvoted enough by retail shareholders to ask. Maybe next quarter on that one. Maybe we can all keep that one in mind if you are somebody that goes to the say.com and contributes or votes on questions. Anyway, I am glad to hear that the ramp is going well. But kind of on that topic of general production, and I'm sure many of you would love to know, how much time do I have to save up? Is my theory that the entire 2024 model year is going to all be Foundation Series trucks, and that general production will start at the beginning of the 2025 model year in November or December? Is that where we are? I don't know. But it's a huge question that many of us would like to know the answer to. Anyway, next up, here's Lars again talking about the timeline for the long-anticipated start of volume production on the Tesla Semi.
So we're finalizing the engineering of the Semi to enable a super cost-effective high-volume production with our learnings from our fleet and our pilot fleet and Pepsi's fleet. which we're expanding this year marginally. In parallel, as we showed in the shareholders deck, we have started construction on the factory in Reno. Our first vehicles are planned for late 2025 with external customers starting in 2026.
Well, I do have to admit that late 2025 or early 2026 is later than I thought. So the Tesla Semi will have been in a sort of semi-public beta. Pardon the phrasing there, semi-public, haha. Anyway, it'll have been in a sort of public beta with Pepsi for 3 years, which followed several years of Tesla doing their own internal beta test with a couple of prototypes that it was using itself to haul stuff back and forth between the Gigafactory in Nevada and the Fremont factory. Anyway, I suppose with a Class 8 semi-truck, you just can't, you absolutely cannot get it wrong. It would be devastating for your corporate customers' billion-dollar businesses if you get the Tesla Semi wrong. It'd be devastating press for Tesla, as if they don't already get a ton of that. And quite frankly, it might be devastating for the EV movement as it pertains to trucking. So I get why Tesla has to spend a ton of time to get the Tesla Semi exactly right. Next up, the question we all want to hear a yes to from Elon. Here's that question.
Okay, a couple more questions. So our favorite, can we make FSD transfer permanent until FSD is fully delivered with level 5 autonomy?
No.
Okay, next question.
Hey, I'm glad it got asked. And I would say don't give up hope, because Elon has already had to swallow his pride and cut the price of FSD twice already, as well as cutting the monthly subscription price in half. So vote with your wallets here. If the current rates are not satisfactory to you and enough people feel the same way and don't purchase it, well, then permanent FSD transfer could still happen. Don't rule it out. After all, it wasn't that long ago that many of us doubted that Tesla would ever offer FSD transfer in any capacity, but they've now done it for the past 6 months. So next up, analyst questions. We move past the always excellent upvoted retail shareholder questions onto the analysts. And this analyst asks what a lot of investors are no doubt thinking: what is Elon's involvement level with Tesla these days when he has so many other companies that he runs? Here's Elon's response.
Well, Tesla constitutes the majority of my work time, and I work pretty much every day of the week. It's rare for me to take a Sunday afternoon off. So I'm going to make sure Tesla is very prosperous, and it is. I think it is prosperous, and it will be very much so in the future.
It's interesting to hear that he says that Tesla takes up the majority of his work time, because I think it used to be that SpaceX took up the majority of his work time, and Tesla was like 2 or 3 days a week. But I suppose we probably have Optimus and the push for FSD to thank for Elon spending more time at Tesla in recent months than he had in the past. But about that time spent at Tesla, remember how Elon had asked for more voting control at the company? Well, an analyst asked him about that on this earnings call, and here's what Elon had to say.
Well, I think no matter what, Tesla, even if I got kidnapped by aliens tomorrow, Tesla will solve autonomy, maybe a little slower, but it would solve autonomy for vehicles at least. I don't know if it would win on with respect to Optimus or with respect to future products, but it would. There's enough momentum for Tesla to solve autonomy, even if I disappeared for vehicles. Now, there's a whole range of things we can do in the future beyond that. I'd be more reticent with respect to Optimus. If we have a super sentient humanoid robot that can follow you indoors and that you can't escape, we're talking Terminator level risk, then I'd be uncomfortable with, if there's not some meaningful level of influence over how that is deployed. And if there's shareholders have an opportunity to ratify or re-ratify the sort of competition. I guess I can't say that. Whatever, but that is a fact. They have an opportunity.
Okay. Very good.
And we'll see. If the company generates a lot of positive cash flow, we could obviously buy back shares.
I was talking about this exact subject with Tesla Hitchhiker 42 last weekend during our Patreon call. With Tesla shareholders having to vote on his old pay package from 2018, yes, we're voting on that in 2024, what if shareholders don't approve it? Might Elon walk away from Tesla? I could honestly see that happening if the vote was a no. Now, that said, I do think that shareholders will approve it, and I honestly think the vote's not going to be all that close. But with Elon's behavior outside of Tesla being concerning to some shareholders, as well as the poor optics on this massive pay package being voted on and potentially awarded in the wake of these huge layoffs that Tesla just had, I do imagine that there will be shareholders out there who seriously consider voting no on it. For me, all I'll say about it is I think it's weird to even be voting on something from 2018 in 2024, but here we are. Next up, earlier in the call, Elon had given a one-sentence answer that I didn't play you the clip of when asked if any other automakers have approached Tesla about licensing FSD. He said one company has approached them. So an analyst then asked him to elaborate on that. Here's what Elon said.
Well, I think it just needs to be obvious that our approach is the right approach. And I think it is. I think we're now with 12.3. If you just have the car drive you around, it is obvious that our solution with a relatively low cost inference computer and standard cameras can achieve self-driving. No LiDARs, no radars, no ultrasonics, nothing. Just
no heavy integration work for the vehicle manufacturers.
Yeah, it's so it really just be a case of having them use the same cameras and inference computer and licensing out software. And but it's once it becomes obvious that if you don't have this in a car, nobody wants your car. Yeah, it's like it's a smart car. I still remember back when Nokia was king of the hill. Yeah,
dominating the cell phone industry.
Yeah, crushing. And I saw them come out with a smartphone that was basically a brick with limited functionality. And then the iPhone and Android. But people still did not understand that all the phones are going to be that way. There's not going to be any flip phones. There'll be a niche product.
Or home phones.
Yeah, not even exactly. When was the last time you saw a home phone? Is it like an anachronism?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
In a hotel. Sometimes in a hotel.
Yeah, the hotels have them. Yeah. So if people don't understand, all cars will need to be smart cars, or you will not sell the car. Will not. Nobody will buy it. Once that becomes obvious, I think licensing becomes not optional.
Becomes a method of survival.
Yeah, so it's license it, or nobody will buy your car.
I mean, one other thing which I'll add is in the conversations which we've had with some of these OEMs, I just want to also point out that they take a lot of time in their product life cycle.
Yeah.
They're talking about years before they will, put it in their product. We might have a licensing deal earlier than that, but it takes a while. So This is where the big difference between us and them is, right?
Yeah, I mean, really, a deal signed now would result in it being in a car in probably 3 years.
Mm-hmm. That would be early.
Yeah, that's like lightning, basically. So
that's being an eager OEM.
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we do sign a deal. I think we're good chance we do sign a deal this year. Maybe more than one. but yeah, it would be probably 3 years before it's integrated with a car, even though all you need is cameras and our inference computer. So it's like not a massive design change.
Yeah, and again, just to clarify, it's not the work which we have to do, it's the work which they have to do, which will take the time.
You know, the guys make a really good point about how slowly the product cycles of traditional automakers move. It's unfortunately just baked into their DNA. That's just always how it's been. Like, I have confidence that a Lucid or a Rivian could implement Tesla's system relatively quickly if they wanted to, but the team is absolutely right there that if it's anyone else, there's going to be a significant lag in when a licensing deal gets signed with Tesla to when cars actually make it into customers' hands and onto the roads. And I do think they will eventually be right about all cars needing some sort of autonomous capability, or else nobody will want to buy them. But, you know, I think it's fair to say that people in general are slow to adopt change. Again, I don't say that with any sort of judgment. It's just human nature. I mean, look at the EV movement. It's not been an overnight thing, even with how Tesla's done such an amazing job making such amazing cars. And for plenty of people, I just think it's going to take a while for them to accept the idea of giving up control, of the idea of a car doing the driving for them. Some people just probably won't want to give it up, period. Maybe a lot of people, I don't know. So I think that piece of it's going to take a while, but I absolutely agree that eventually Tesla's assertion that every car will need to be capable of autonomy is correct. Next question was asked in a very financial analyst kind of way, but it boiled down to, is Tesla done with price cuts, or do they have the margins still there to dig a bit more into those margins if they want to cut the prices on the cars further? Here's Elon.
Yeah, I think we can be free cash flow positive meaningfully.
I think Vaibhav said it in his opening remarks. Like, our cost down efforts, we basically were offsetting the price cuts.
That's what I was going to say.
Goal. Like, we're trying to give it back to the customers.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like, for any given company, if you sell a great product at a great price, if you have a great product at a great price, the sales will be excellent.
Mm-hmm.
That's true of any arena. So over time, we do need to keep making sure that that it's a great product at a great price, and moreover, that price is accessible to people. So it's not, you have to solve both the value for money and the fundamental affordability question. The fundamental affordability question is sometimes overlooked. If somebody's earning several $100,000 a year, they don't think of a car from a fundamental affordability standpoint. But for the vast majority of people are living paycheck to paycheck. So it actually makes a difference if the cost per month for lease or financing is $10 one way or the other. So it is important to keep improving the affordability and to keep, it's just like making the price
more accessible.
Yeah, exactly. Make the price more accessible, the value for money better, and to keep improving that over time.
But also to make kick-ass cars that people want to buy.
Yeah, it's got to be a great product at a great price, and the standards for what constitutes a great product at a great price keep increasing. So there's like, you can't just be static. You have to keep making the car better, improving the price of it, improving the cost of production, and that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and in fact, like I said in my opening remarks also, like the updated Model 3 is a fantastic car. I don't think people fully even understand the amount of engineering effort which has gone, and Lars and team have actually put out videos explaining how much the car is different. I mean, it looks and feels different. Not only it looks and feels different, we've added so much value to it, but you can lease it for like as low as $299 a month.
Yeah. Without gas.
Yeah.
Well, they don't rule out further price cuts there. That's the takeaway. I doubt it would happen in Q4 of this year, which is always their busiest, highest demand quarter. So I think if we are going to get any more price cuts this year, I imagine that they would happen between now and September. And since we just got a $2,000 price cut almost across the board a week or so ago, everything but the Model 3, I doubt anything else is going to happen in the immediate future. So we shall see. This next one is for those of you outside North America who have been waiting for FSD to come to your country.
I mean, like new markets, yeah, we are. There are a bunch of markets where we don't currently sell cars that we should be selling cars in. We'll see some acceleration of that.
And FSD in new markets?
Yeah. So the thing about the end-to-end neural net based autonomy is that just like a human, it actually works pretty well without modification in almost any market. So we plan on, with the approval of the regulators, releasing it as a supervised autonomy system in any market that where we can get regulatory approval for that, which we think includes China. So yeah, it's just like a human, you can go rent a car in a foreign country and you can drive pretty well. Obviously, if you live in that country, you'll drive better, and so we'll make the car drive better in these other countries with country-specific training. But it can drive quite well almost everywhere.
Yeah, the basics of driving are basically the same everywhere. Like, car is a car, traffic is a traffic light, road is the road.
Yeah, it understands that it shouldn't hit things no matter where it is.
Exactly. There are some road rules that you need to follow. In China, you shouldn't cross over a solid line to do a lane change. US is a recommendation, I think. China, you get fined heavily if you do that. We have to do some adaptations, but it's mostly smaller adaptations, not like an entire change of stack or something like that.
I wish we had a bit more context for how quickly they're actually talking about there. Like, with regulatory approval, could they release FSD supervised in a matter of weeks in, say, the UK or Germany, or pick any country, really? Or is it more of a months-long time horizon? Still, that hopefully brings those of you outside of the US and Canada a bit of comfort. And that brings us to our last clip from this very busy earnings call, which answers a question about how close Tesla is to hitting its target yields on the 4680 batteries.
We're making good progress on that, but I don't think it's super important for at least the near term. As Laura said, we think it'll be exceed the competitiveness of suppliers by the end of this year, and then we'll continue to improve it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note also that the ramp right now is relevant to the Cybertruck ramp.
Yeah,
and so we're not going to just randomly build 4680s unless we have a place to put them, and so we're going to make sure we're prudent about that. But we also have a lot of investments with all our cell suppliers and vendors. They're great partners, and they done great development work with us. And a lot of the advancements in technology and chemistry we found in 4680, they're also putting into their cells.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of the 4680, Tesla doing internal cells, was a hedge against what would happen with our suppliers. Because for a while there, it was very difficult because every big car maker put in massive battery orders. And so the price per kilowatt hour of lithium-ion batteries went to crazy numbers, to crazy levels.
Bonkers.
Yeah, just bonkers. So, okay, we've got to have some hedge here to deal with, cost per kilowatt hours numbers that were double what we anticipated. If we have an internal cell production, then we have that hedge against demand shocks, with too much demand. That's really the way to think about it. It's not like we want to take on a whole bunch of problems just for the hell of it. We did this help program in order to address the crazy increase in cost per kilowatt hour from our suppliers due to gigantic orders placed by every car maker on Earth.
I suppose that the sinking cost of battery cells has played a not insignificant part in the significant price cuts that Tesla's been able to make over the past, couple of years now, while still maintaining pretty strong margins. I thought it was also neat to hear about how part of their strategy for developing their own battery cells was to hedge against the cost of those cells from suppliers when they have no control over that. Smart stuff. Of course, Tesla's full of people way smarter than me. It's just an interesting insight to me into how Tesla has to think about the entire picture with this stuff. All right, that is a wrap on a pretty darn interesting Q1 earnings call. As always, I hope you enjoyed the highlight clips and my analysis there, but I'm not quite done with this episode of Ride the Lightning yet. Stay tuned as I've got a bit more podcast coming up for you right after this.
Hi, this is Franz von Holzhausen, and you're listening to Ride the Lightning with Ryan McCaffrey, the Tesla unofficial podcast.
As usual with the earnings call episodes, and especially on this one, which is going to end up pushing 2 hours, I don't have time to get to the Ride the Lightning hotline today, but I welcome and invite you to call in if you've got a Tesla question, comment, or discussion topic. Maybe you want to react to one of the huge stories from this week. Maybe you've got something else Tesla related on your mind. There are 2 easy ways to call in. Either use your smartphone's built-in voice recording software, record your question, please try to keep it to 90 seconds or less so that I can get to as many people each week as possible, and then email that file to me at my Tesla Podcast email address, which is simply teslapodcast@gmail.com. Alternatively, you can just call in and leave a message on the Ride the Lightning hotline. That is a toll-free number that you can call anytime, and that number is 1-888-989-8752. Again, that's 1-888-989-TSLA. Now, real quick, in my little personal corner of the podcast here, I wanted to give all of you that enjoy following along with my family's dog journey a little update. Zelina, our future service dog that we were puppy raisers for, and we've been without her now for, 2.5 months. It was early February that we turned her in. We got her second monthly progress report this week in her ongoing quest to become a service dog for somebody that needs her, so that that person can live a more independent life. And Zelina, good marks again. Good marks again. I'll read you the summary here real quick. Zelina continues to progress with retrieve and can now hold a dumbbell while walking and transition from a stand to a sit with it. Next, we will be focusing on continuing to hold the dumbbell while turning before starting get. She has progressed nicely with push and can initiate from a control position to target drawers, cabinet doors, and closet doors with her nose. Next, we will be focusing on patterning a seal hop to keep her paws off of walls before transitioning to push plates, which means like to literally push to open a accessible door. She's been making progress with her equipment sensitivity. She's in the early stages of learning cover, but is following a hand cue well and targeting her handler's lap nicely. While on a field trip, Zelina was easy to engage and verbally responsive for most of her floor skills, but did have a few that required a higher degree of handler support to be successful. I know some of that might not make sense. It's some service dog terminology, but short version is she seems to be progressing pretty well. So she is moving along on her quest to become a service dog. So we've been looking forward to every update with bated breath. So we've now got to wait 4 more weeks for the next one. All right, time for a pro tip of the week. It comes from Nick in Northeast Ohio.
Hi, Ryan. This is Nick from Northeast Ohio. First-time caller, long-time listener. Calling in with a pro tip. This comes when you have autopilot engaged and set to a preset speed. Much like other car manufacturers, and specifically we used to have 2 Subarus, and if you raise the toggle on the right-hand side of the steering wheel, just by one tap, it would move in increments of 5 miles an hour at a time. And then if you held that toggle, it would move slowly, one at a time. Well, on our Teslas, on the right scroll wheel, that's how we affect the speed. With a quick flip of the wheel, just a rapid spin of it, either up or down, it will move quickly in increments of 5. If you slowly move the wheel, it moves in increments of 1. But just by quickly going up or down, it goes in increments of 5, which makes it really simple, especially when speed zones often or always move in increments of 5. So, pro tip, been listening to see if someone would call in with this, but I don't think anybody has. So hopefully listeners will take this and use it. And thanks for everything you do, and look forward to the next episode.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for your call. This is one of those that counts, I think, as a top 10 pro tip. Like, it's up there. It's high on the list. I'm almost sure that I've played it before, but it's worth bringing back up again from time to time for new listeners or anybody that maybe might have bought their car since this last came up. Maybe they were listening before they had their Tesla, now they have it. Anyway, I appreciate you taking the time to share this. I personally use this one literally every single day. Every single day I use this pro tip. So thank you, Nick. And if anybody else out there has a good pro tip of the week that you'd like to share with me and your fellow Tesla owners and enthusiasts, you can send that in the same way that you send in the regular Ride the Lightning hotline calls, which I just gave you the instructions for a couple minutes ago. All right, before I finally get out of here after this nearly 2-hour-long episode, I want to mention some friends of Ride the Lightning that my hope is they'll be of use to you sooner or later. Let's start with AbstractOcean.com, makers of so many excellent aftermarket accessories for your Tesla. No matter which Tesla you have, they even have Rivian stuff, but lots and lots of stuff for S, X, 3, and Y. So head on over to AbstractOcean.com, take a look. They've got a ton of great lighting kits, which I'm definitely a fan of, like the puddle lights. You know, that little light that I know up until I got my Tesla, I don't think I ever for a second thought about puddle lights, but now you can replace that little light at the very bottom of your door when you open it, and you can buy like the Tesla logo from abstractocean.com so that when you open your door, it projects the Tesla logo down. Sorry for the tongue twister there. It is late and I've been talking for quite a while. It is clearly time for me to get out of here and go to bed. But anyway, they've got all kinds of neat stuff like that, and they continue to kindly extend that 15% offer discount code to listeners of this podcast. So head on over, abstractocean.com, take a look at everything they've got, pile everything you like into your online shopping cart. When you get to checkout, use the coupon code RTL Podcast. That's all one word, no spaces, RTL Podcast, and you will get 15% off of your first order. Next up, the Snap Plate and the new Snap Plate Plus. These are front license plate holders designed by former nuclear power plant engineers. They say that safety and conservatism is ingrained in us, so we designed Snap Plate to be the safe option we wanted for our personal vehicles, but we've learned over the last 4 years that different people have different priorities, and many customers just want things to be as strong as possible. So that's where the new Snap Plate Plus comes into play. It's designed to give those customers the strongest possible mount. These things are nice and minimalist design. They blend in great with the front end of the car. If you either legally are required to have a front plate on your car, or you just want one, if it's just more convenient for you, I definitely recommend the Snap Plate, or if you prefer, the Snap Plate Plus. To get yours, go to everyamp.com/RTL. That's everyamp.com/RTL, and use the coupon code RTL for a discount on top of that. Thank you to the Snap Plate Plus folks, the Every Amp folks, for that. Next up, BudgetSafeSolar.com. If you're considering solar for your home or business, I would recommend keeping Budget Safe Solar on your short list because you're obviously going to get quotes from a few different places. I would throw Budget Safe Solar in there. They ended up being a great fit for me. Super happy with my system, my wife and I. In fact, we just got a notice in the mail yesterday that our local utility provider is raising the rates again. And so we'll be a little subject to that, but thankfully not all that much. You can do the same by going solar. Now, most of you probably don't live in a place with electricity as expensive as it is here, but solar is still a great way to go because, hey, you're driving your car on free renewable energy, which is pretty sweet. So if you're interested in a solar installation for your home or business, go to budgetsafesolar.com. They do also offer home battery storage as part of their solar installations now too, including the Tesla Powerwall. So if you do proceed with an installation, please use the referral code RTL. Immaculate Reflections. They can be found online at irdetailing.com. They do all kinds, any kind of detailing work you could possibly want, they most likely do. Whether that's ceramic coating, so you don't have to wax your car for the next 3 to 5 years, because ceramic coating is just a next generation version of wax. Maybe you want to do paint correction, get that finish looking as good as it possibly can. Maybe you want to do paint protection film, PPF, over some or all of the car. If you're in or going to be in the San Francisco Bay Area, the greater San Francisco Bay Area, with a car that you care about, whether it's your Tesla or something else in your garage, I guarantee that you will be happy when you go to pick that car up after it's been detailed at Immaculate Reflections. So again, head on over to irdetailing.com. When you reach out through the website, mention that you're a Ride the Lightning listener, and the Ride the Lightning listener discount will be extended to you. Finally, the Patreon. I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but if you feel like you've gotten a lot out of this podcast over the weeks, months, years that you've been listening, and you want to give something back, first of all, I'd be super grateful if you decided to do that. If I would just be extremely appreciative. You can give back through Patreon by pledging $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever you want to do. Each of the different support tiers has stacking perks that go along with it as thank yous from me. So again, the $5 tier, the base level tier, gets you that early access to each week's episode. The $10 per month tier gets you the early access and those 90 plus weekly lightning round bonus mini episodes. You go up to the maximum plaid tier, the $25 a month tier. You get all of that, plus the shout out at the end of each episode and a standing invitation to each month's Zoom Hangout now. We're doing them on Zoom, which we have an awesome time at every single month, chatting all things Tesla. So take a look at the Patreon if you feel it in your heart to do so. You can find it at patreon.com/Tesla podcast. Patreon spelled Patreon. You can follow this podcast for free on whichever podcast service you prefer. Most of you get it from Apple Podcasts, but I'm also on TuneIn, Spotify, and YouTube podcasts. You can search for me on any of those by typing in Ride the Lightning Tesla podcast. Well, that'll almost guarantee that you'll find it right away. If you need a referral link when purchasing a new Tesla to get that 3 extra free months of FSD, you have to order your car with this link. I'm told it is not going to be applied retroactively after you've purchased it and before you've taken delivery. So to order your car with the referral perk baked in, type into your favorite web browser, ts.la/Ryan73014, and order your car, and you'll be good to go. Follow me on Twitter /X if you're interested, or Instagram, or both, or neither. But my username on both of those is the same. It's DMC_Ryan. And you can email me anytime, teslapodcast@gmail.com. Before I go and finally end this incredibly long episode, I want to say thank you very much to the Patreon backers, those upper tier Patreon backers. I'll start with the grandfathered in plaid level supporters. Big thanks goes out to George Cassiopo, Logan Willis, Peter Chalet, Eric Randolph, Dory and Steve Guberman, the Tesla Owners Club of Taiwan, Ron Lee, Charlie Gillespie, David Perella, Dennis Peak, Jeff Angwin, Chase Cabanillas, the Lydia family, Aaron Altschul, Jared Brown, Jerome Strack, Jamie Dalton, Mike and Barber from Louisville, David J. Howes, Matt Nixon, the Tesla Owners Club of Wisconsin, Ish, Not Elon Musk, Peter, and the Bear Boys of Colorado. Next up, the Maximum Plaid backers. Huge thank you goes out to Jonathan Wales, Cameron Clark, Daniel Grummer, Seth Capello, Nick and Tony, the Galpin family, Ryan from New York City, Darren Nickel, Kaz Barnes, Brett Libano, Patrick Wisniewski, there we go, Gil Cabrera, Todd Badger, Joe Edgel, Kevin Yank, the Tesla Owners Club of San Joaquin Valley, Michael Williams, Will Stedman, Derek Nesselrote, Justin Perez, Jeremy Harris, Chris Beach, Tom Mills, Corey O'Donnell, Aaron, John Cody, Joel Sapp, Paul Casarino, Richard Corley, Chris Osborne, KB, Doug Carey, James Gregory, Adam Lavoie, contact1callcenter.com, Jason Chalukas, Travis Krenzel, Bruce Otterstein, Tom Behan, Josh Pennington, Matt Kalin, John from Cream Ridge, New Jersey, Sean Tisdale, Dustin Hart, Michael Gallo, Derek Finley, Charles Clement, and Rav. Finally, big thanks to the Roadster in Space tier backers. They are Pete White, Lyle Austin, Steve Radspinner, Fernando Cordero, Lawton from Chicago, Sean Neidig, Neil Weaver, Jackson Wallace, Rolf and Jennifer Evers, Howard Anthony Smith, Victoria Iacovetto, Tesla Hitchhiker 42, Kara Weston, Robert from near Philly, Kristen Rumble, American Home Contractors, and GetAmber.com. By the way, real quick, Sean Neidig, huge congratulations to him. He took delivery recently of his Cybertruck. He had been waiting. I'll just tell you this quick little anecdote. Sean has awesomely come to pretty much every single monthly Zoom hangout that I do on for the upper tier Patreon folks, the Maximum Plaid and higher. And every single month, Sean would use a virtual background of the Cybertruck. And he'd been super stoked for the Cybertruck, as so many of us are. But when he logged into the call, at the beginning of this month, earlier this month in April, he signed in, he joined the call, and he was sitting in the real Cybertruck, his Cybertruck. I was so happy for him. So congratulations, Sean. Thank you to all of you. If you have made it this far, you deserve a badge. You deserve an achievement, something, for hanging in with me for nearly 2 hours here on what I hope was a pretty good episode. I felt good about all the cool information there was. I hope you enjoyed listening to this one. I will not ramble on and extend this thing any longer than it has to go. But a sincere thank you to all of you. If you are hearing this, it means you've spent a lot of your time this week listening to this podcast. Your time is extremely valuable. I recognize that. I do not take it for granted. I am extremely grateful for your time, your attention, your support, whether it's just listening or whether you're also supporting on Patreon. Thank you to all of you. And with that, I wish you happy electric motoring, and I will see you back here next week.
Elon Musk, people don't like Elon Musk. The guy founded PayPal and Tesla, and people are like, yeah, but he's a troll and a bad dad. I'm like, so was mine. He did nothing to fight climate change. Also, have you been in a Tesla? Have you been in a Tesla? My buddy let me drive his Tesla. I laughed out loud at how fast it went. Been clinically depressed my entire life, on dozens of medications, in a Tesla for 13 seconds, cured forever.
I mean, I think a Tesla is the most fun thing you could possibly buy ever. That's what it's meant to be. Our goal is to make it's not exactly a car. It's actually a thing to maximize enjoyment. It's maximum fun.